Stay tuned. The show is about to begin.
Okay, Jillian, I'm bringing you up. Awesome. Let me change the thing here. All right. And I just want to double check the settings. All right. Yay!
Sound.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Y'all, it's been a technology interesting afternoon today. So welcome to Alignment Vision Action. I am your host, Laurel Rutledge. We are here on the Fireside platform that was developed by Fallon Fatemi and Mark Cuban with some amazing shows, amazing artists, amazing creators. And we are going to have an amazing conversation with Jillian Ryan this afternoon. And come on down if you are on YouTube. I will not be able to see your comments on YouTube, but please tune in and I will, if you say send comments, I will absolutely get back to you later on your questions or comments. And in the show notes, and I will put these show notes also on YouTube, you will be able to get in touch with Jillian. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we are going to jump into this conversation. So welcome, Leela. Welcome, Jenny. So glad y'all are here. So Jillian Ryan has 20 years of experience as a business strategist and risk analyst to both Fortune 100 executives and small business owners. It's one of the ways we connected was on that whole risk thing. She's a serial entrepreneur, a speaker, and the host of the Good Office podcast. And most importantly, she's a self-proclaimed fun aunt. And I love that. I love being the fun auntie. You can see all of her information, but you can also get in touch with her on LinkedIn. You can follow her on LinkedIn at Ryan Jillian. So her LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Ryan Jillian. You can get to her on LinkedIn. So Jillian, welcome to Fireside.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was like, somehow I sound very old by that point.
I know. I was looking the other day and I'm like, really? I left with almost 30 years of experience? That sounds, that
I
feels
know.
kind
You're
of weird.
like, used to, we exaggerated a little bit. Now I'm like, no, let's just say it's
Right? It's like, no, it really was that long. It really was that long. So I wanted to have Jillian on the show because we actually met at a networking event. And those of you guys who have been with me a while on the radio show or the podcast or wherever know that whole networking thing, me and my introverted self, I just can't.
Same.
And so, see, exactly. So I went to this, her Texas, Jasmine Brand does it. And so it was Jasmine and my friend, Legina Ray Harris, who actually had me do that because she's the one that told me about it. And actually my marketing person in San Antonio met Jasmine somewhere else and had mentioned about it. And then Legina said, I was like, okay, that's two people I need to go.
Like, okay, fine.
And right. And then Jillian was on the panel and we started talking afterwards because I'm like, her message was so great. And we wanted to come have this conversation because as a serial entrepreneur, as someone who also came out of corporate, and as someone who just had to make a tough decision that I'm going to have her tell you about, we thought it was really important to have this conversation around the realities of entrepreneurship and the decisions we make in business. So, Jillian, let's dive in. Tell people kind of a little bit more about who you are, the businesses you started, and then I want you to tell them this big decision you had to make that drove our conversation. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So the quick spiel is, so I spent almost 10 years in DC as a business consultant, risk navigator for Fortune 100s. Super fun. Loved it. Kind of fell into it after college. Was sure I wanted to work for the CIA, which is why I went out there. And then decided, no, I like private sector. Did that for 10 years, came back to Texas where my whole family is after that. Worked for a startup to kind of learn because I knew I wanted to start something, but didn't know how. So worked for a successful entrepreneur on a startup that he had done. Did that for 2 years and then kind of launched my own thing. I launched consulting first, which we could talk about why I quickly pivoted from that. There were so many lessons learned in the last 8 years. And so did that first, and then immediately started a product-based business, thinking it would be easier to sell, not having to sell myself. So I started it was a corporate, it evolved into a corporate gifting company. And so we had some fantastic successes. It was, again, kind of an accidental company I started because, like I said, consulting was what I always wanted to do, but I chickened out as soon as I did it and was like, no, it'll be easier to go sell a product instead of, which, spoiler alert, it's not. It's like, you need just as much confidence.
Yes.
And so started that. After, I think, 2 years, we ended up getting in FabFitFun, which is the US's, well, I guess the world's largest subscription box. And so that was the first, at that time, it was just me and my sister. And so they had come to me and they were like, we'd like to buy 300,000 boxes of stationery, which, okay. I was like, all right, literally Googling, like, how do you ethically manufacture? I was like, I have no idea. But that was when I was like, okay, fine. This is actually a real business. And so we ended up getting it then in Real Simple and Forbes, and we had all this success. But flash forward to 8 years later, COVID ended up actually being great for us because everyone kind of shifted their events budget to sending gifts to their employees and clients at home. So it was good, except that's a whole nother story on the supply chain side of that. Because we had just been featured in the Real Simple Gift Guide, like right before COVID hit. And so we were sold out of everything whenever COVID hit. And so finally our business coach was like, find something to sell. So anyways, that was when we pivoted and started curating items as well. Did that. It was great. And then demand tanked last year. And again, we just kind of, basically, long story short, ended up deciding, even though we were having amazing success and we were having great revenues and the team was fantastic and I loved our mission, that I decided to shut it down in April of this year, which was definitely the hardest decision I have ever made. But in case anyone's wanting to know what my biggest takeaway is, you can't outwork bad profit margins.
And that's the thing, right? So let's dive into that because, you know, if you started a business, especially if you started a business and then COVID hit and then everybody's on social media and everybody's selling everybody their plan to get you rich in 2 minutes and, you know, follow this 6-step thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Follow this 6-step thing to get to your 6-figure. Like I literally saw a guy start showing up in my IG feed that said, and it got at the heart of why I hate the word coach. I just hate it. And I don't like to call myself a coach for a number of reasons. And exactly. His IG was, get my program. I can help you build a 6-figure coaching business with no experience.
Oh, okay. Well, you'd be a great coach.
And so I'm thinking to myself, see, this is why it's so hard to sell because so many people buy into this stuff. They get a horrible person, a horrible coach. Let me rephrase that. They may be a great person, but they're a horrible coach because they have no experience. And then they're like, nobody knows how to coach. Well, that's not true, right? But so we get caught up in all of this get rich quick in the new world of get rich quick, which is social media. And people don't think about all the behind the scenes, the tough stuff. And you had to decided to make, the tough decision to say, you know what, we're going to shut it down. We've had great success. There are some things, if you look at the surface, it's all good. It
looks like we were great. Yeah, exactly.
But we weren't. And I had to make a tough decision. So talk to us a little bit about, and if you think about some of the folks that are going to be listening that are making these decisions to either do a side hustle or doing their own business now or trying to figure it out, talk a little bit about what happened to have you realize that it wasn't what you thought it was, and then how you really got your heart around making the decision.
I feel like what didn't happen in the last 3 years.
Right.
So first we had, again, supply chain issues. So demand was great. Supply chain was so finicky and all over the place, even though I thought I had done a great job at diversifying our supply chain because I knew this
Mm-hmm.
was important from my previous days. And
Right.
but then when the entire world shuts down, that to say that kind of ruins your diversification plan.
Right.
And so we even then had problems with our US supply chain, even though
Mm-hmm.
everything was manufactured in the US. Like, for instance, our notebooks we have made in
Mm-hmm.
upstate New York. We even use a New York paper company, and they
Right.
couldn't get the spirals because that comes
Ah.
from one factory where
Oh.
the whole thing is just crazy. I was like,
Yes.
I never
Right.
realized how complicated supply chain was until actually being in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Anyways, we went through that. We went through all sorts of life changes as well. I feel like we've all been going through in the last 3 years.
Yes. Right.
We grew our team to, which again, this is something I saw happen a lot in COVID,
Mm-hmm.
to where you grew your team because of the demand that we had. And then all of a sudden it didn't even have to be a recession, but the fact that my clients were businesses, the talk of a recession was enough for them to put the kibosh on corporate gifting,
Yes.
which I should back up and say corporate gifting to me was always not a nice to have. To me, it is a have to have. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's client appreciation, ways to get, if you do it right, if it's actually a gift, if it's not marketing.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
Anyways, so we had all that. We had an IRS audit, which again, I thought we were too small for that and had always paid other people to, like, the good people to do stuff. And again, it's just stuff that happens that took a lot of time and money for no consequence. I was like, it was just literally one thing after the other. And so, and then finally at the end of the day, we had decided, we grew the team. I had finally decided, okay, we either need to scale up or shut back or scale this all the way back down if I wanted to keep going. And so I decided to scale up before the recession talk. And so we'd gone out, we'd found investors, we had done all that stuff. And then at the end of the day, like, the more revenues were never our problem. Our problem is always profit. And so, like, I could get the revenue in the door, but it would go out 1.5 times as fast. And so it's like,
wow,
it's so hard to compete in that industry when the level of customer service expectations are so high, which again, I'm a full believer, but they also want to pay Amazon prices. And so it's like you get one or the other. You can't do both.
Right.
Anyways, so it was, and I had employed like some of my best friends. One of them was a college roommate. As I say, so again, the mental aspect of it. And I just, after it had been 8 years of building, and I was one of those that I was like, I can make this work. I've got a master's in business. I can figure this out.
And this can't be that hard.
This cannot be that hard. Why? And I was looking around and being like, how come these other people can figure it out, but we can't figure it out? Which again, you never know. Who knows if their profits were any better? And so, anyways, it was finally then once I sat down and kept looking at the numbers that I was like, okay, even if we brought in 2 million in sales this year, I'm pretty sure it would cost us 2.4. So like, why are we continuing to do this? Unless, so I was like, okay, this only works then if you really scale it up. And I had never wanted to own a giant warehouse and a team of 100. Like, I was like, it was all stuff I hadn't asked myself. Like, am I building something I even want?
Wow.
So I finally decided, no, I'm not. I'm tired of letting it take from me. And that was where I finally got. So typically now, and I'm like, I don't think of my business, I don't think of it as my business failed. I think I would have been a failure if I kept going. Because I had just finally gotten to a point where I was like, I don't like what I'm building. Like, this is not what I want. This is not profitable. It's not ever going to make us the money. So why are we putting this much effort into something that just doesn't work? Just because I was too scared to look like a failure. So
oh my gosh. And what you just said is, but what you just said is so powerful because, you know, I'm in a certification program now. And one of the things that is constantly there is not only mindset and looking at your numbers, right? Stop being afraid to look at your numbers because numbers are data and you can move with that, right? You need that information. But you said something so powerful when you said that I'm building something I don't even want to build.
Yeah.
And I had never asked myself that question. What
Most
do you
people
want to
don't.
build? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And it's
That's
so
so
funny because
powerful.
I like Layla's question, by the way. I don't want to just overlook you.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes, completely. And that's what I keep saying. Again, I still shop on Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm not like a huge anti Amazon person, but it
Right.
makes me so angry from a small business
Yes.
standpoint of
Yes.
how they've ruined market expectations. And so
Yes.
again, it's so you can't compete with free 2-day shipping. Like you just can't. That's what I'm
No.
saying.
No.
And so, but again, on what can be done on that was one, be aware. And so finally realized
Mm-hmm.
I was fighting up against the behemoth and realized
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it the way we were doing it.
Yeah.
And I think you can get away from that. Like if you can niche all the way down, like if you've
Right.
got one amazing product, then yes, you can compete with that. The fact on
Right.
ours was corporate gifting, and they were so finicky that they were always wanting
Oh
the
yeah.
newest thing, and so like I couldn't compete. But I do
Right.
think you can compete on based on niche and customer service. It's how we tried for a while. So
Right. Well, and that's really important because yeah, Leela and full disclosure, Leela and I've known each other for 20 something years. She's
oh, love it,
amazing. She's
love
an
it.
entrepreneur too, came out of corporate,
Mhm.
and just has this amazing social justice brain. And Jenny has become just a really just I don't know what I'd do without her. And
I love
so,
this.
we and Leela and I talk about this kind of stuff all the time because I'm kind of like you. I I have a real hard time with Amazon
Yeah.
from an ethical
Because they did
perspective.
it. Yes. Well, and they did it from that was their strategy to take a loss
Yes,
for that many years
yes,
to corner the market. And so it was like,
they did, and I struggle with them because there are some times when I'm like, I really need this thing tomorrow, right? Because my
I
life is
know.
not together, and I didn't have 2 weeks ahead of time to
Yep.
order it, right?
Exactly.
Um, but what
And I
irritates
now
me,
don't like paying for shipping either.
I don't want to pay for shipping either,
I
right?
know.
And the things that I'm ordering are things that are commodity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
However, it irritates me that I go and because most people don't really pay attention, I go and see something online from the actual producer or
Mhm.
creator,
Yeah.
and then I pull it up and there's all these different ones, and you have to look really carefully because some of those are not that person. They're actually Amazon, where Amazon has
Yes.
gone to some other vendor
Yes.
somewhere
Yep.
else in the world,
Yep.
and they
And
have
I've been duped.
duplicated or
And I
stolen
even, as
IP.
I say, I've even been duped. And I knew what I was looking
Yes,
for, trying to make sure I got
yes,
them. It was a certain
yes.
pins that I love. And yes, they were ones that they made it look exactly like it, but it was not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't
Yep.
pay attention, right? So there's that whole ethical piece
Yeah.
of that.
I mean, not to mention
And
how they treat their workers. I was
uh
like, I don't
it's a
like
whole
getting paid off
thing.
their business.
Right. It's a
Exactly.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the other piece that you said though that I think people want to should really consider, and I was just having this conversation last night or night before, I can't remember, about AI yesterday, about
Oh,
AI and
yep.
creators, right? Because now, especially in the art
Yep.
world, and AI going to like duplicate brushstrokes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, vertical integration, y'all. You were already selling posters of your original art.
Yeah.
You go get the AI, you create it, you
Yep.
sell the poster, right? And to your point that I think we miss sometimes because we're all in this feeling of catastrophe, right? It's taking
Yeah.
over, Amazon's taking over all these things. There is power in what you said about getting really clear, not only
Yes.
about your niche, but your differentiator.
Yep.
So that artist that is painting a portrait, right, from their
Amazon
hand,
cannot do. Yeah.
they can't do that. And there's going to be so much AI out there that actually the value of
I agree.
human generated stuff is
I
going
think
to
it's
go
gone
up.
up. Yep.
Yes.
Agreed.
So kind of that whole idea of, look, you are getting me and my company. You're not getting
Yep.
bots. You
Yep.
are going to get a certain level of quality, a certain level of customer service, but we're not going to deliver it to you in 2 hours. It's going to take 2 weeks. So I need you to wait that, or if not, that's okay. Because
If
here's
not,
what we're
that's fine.
doing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, and
Yeah.
I also think, to your point, I think it's going to make those fluffy content that you were talking about, I think they should be scared.
Yes. I
Because
agree.
yes, AI can say that stuff. But if you're actually
Yep.
putting out well thought out, strategic type content, I do think
Yes.
it'll be a long time before AI can actually
I do too.
actually replicate that. You're right. I think
Too.
it makes the human aspect that
Yep.
much more important.
Right. And I was reading an article the other day, my lawyer actually posted it, that they're doing some like testing of AI in the simple area, like math. And they said, when
Mhm.
it first started and everybody was starting to use it in
All that.
research, it was getting 98% right. Right now it's like 2% are
Now
getting
it's
right.
getting
I'm like,
dumber. It's interacting with all of us, and it's like, oh no.
it's all of us. I'm like, that's called human interaction. It's machine
Yep.
learning. So if all the people putting into the machine are doing stupid stuff, you're going to
Yep.
get stupid
Yep.
stuff out, right? So like, we got to be
So true.
careful.
Exactly.
So Jillian, one of the things you've talked about a couple things. There's the people side, but there's the business side. So I want to start with the business side. So you said,
Mhm.
we were making profit, right? I mean, we were
Yeah.
making revenue. Revenue was not a problem. We could get revenue in, but we
Yep.
were making profit. Talk a little bit about number one. How did you get the courage? Because a lot of times people are just afraid to look at the numbers. How
Yeah.
did you get the courage to really start looking at that number and really looking at the financial health of your business? And what were your indicators that said, I don't even have the triggers to pull anymore?
Yeah, and I think it's where you get to the point too of how much you're willing to give, because like
Mm,
I had gotten, because I've heard people say before, like, companies don't go bankrupt like founders do. And it's like,
yeah.
yes, as I say, to where you get to a point and you're like, I have given all I can give to this thing,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
again, I'm not willing to scale it, like go after the VC type money that it would take to get to
Right.
that scale. Like
Mm-hmm,
that's when I think once I realized, okay, this doesn't work at
mm-hmm,
this scale.
mm-hmm.
What would it take for it to work? And that was when, okay, it only works if you do this at a VC scale.
Yeah.
And that was when finally I was like, I don't want that. Like, that's not,
Yeah.
it's not what I want. And so, like, I
Mm-hmm,
mean, I'm making it sound very linear. I went
mm-hmm.
through this decision for probably 9 months, maybe, back and
Yeah.
forth on, okay, do
Mm-hmm,
we scale up? Do we completely pivot?
mm-hmm.
Um, because then again, the last 3 years I think has made all of us like excellent pivoters.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we then were like, okay, how do we pivot into something more that the market needs, and where can we
Mm-hmm,
really then compete
mm-hmm.
on? Because my thing, coming from a consulting background, my thing was I was also tired of seeing people use corporate gifting incorrectly. And so therefore
Right.
they were thinking it is just an expense for them because of the way they're
Right.
doing it. And so like if
Yes.
they would do it correctly. And so I was like, but I couldn't ever get to the way that market is done. Everybody delegates this to their assistant. And
Right.
so I couldn't get to the one that cared about the strategy piece of it. Anyways, so we were going to pivot to a consulting type model, but again,
Mm-hmm.
it was too much education that was going to have to be done.
Yeah.
And I finally got to where I was like, I'm tired of making this hard. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just, again, if I thought I was building what I wanted to build, then there are ways we could have
Mm-hmm.
found ways, but
Right. Right.
I just finally got to a point where it's like, I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
I think the IRS audit finally was like, why am I fighting so hard? Like,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, and to your point, there are always ways to scale. Putting on people, getting VC funds, getting crowdsourcing. There are
Yep.
ways to support
Yeah.
big growth, right, and big
Yeah.
scaling.
Yep.
And there is a cost to that beyond
Yep.
the money, in
Yes.
time,
Oh,
in
yes.
energy,
Yep.
in control.
I was saying,
Right?
well,
'Cause
and as an introvert, I was just saying, this is when it
yes,
comes back to that, because that was when I was like, okay, I don't know if you've ever also taken the Strengths Finder test.
yes,
Like, so
yep,
mine are all in the like relator, like all of that section. I have
mm-hmm,
none from the influencing category.
yeah,
So I was like, it's like I have no woo.
right,
But it is why people then get in there and they're like, oh, wait, no, now we actually like you because you're saying real things. But
right,
to woo them there, I wasn't going to get it. So crowdfunding
right,
never was going to work. So it was like
yeah,
also then finding out how you can work in your strengths
yes,
and noticing what you're not good at. Like,
yeah,
and again, I can try all day long to have woo. I don't have woo. That's just not me.
right, and that's like me. I don't have a poker face. I'm not going to get one. It's too
Oh,
much work.
me neither.
I'm not going to do it. So I try to
And
manage
I'm not
what
going
I
to
say.
sugarcoat it. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I try to watch my tone, right, and I try to pick the right
Exactly.
words. But my face is going to say you've lost your mind. So I
Yeah.
just, it just is
Well,
what it is.
because a lot of times people are paying, as consultants, people are paying
Yeah.
us to
Yes.
say the hard things that their team
Yes.
can't say. Like,
Exactly.
they need to hear it.
They need
Like,
to
I'm
hear
just
it.
trying to help you.
Right. They need to hear it so they can actually take action upon it. Right. And I think what you said is so important around, you know, looking, not only looking at those numbers, looking at what you've got honestly, what's
hmm
honestly happening. Right. We
Yeah.
have,
You have to
and
take the emotion out of it, which is
it's
very,
not emotional. It's
very
hard.
hard.
It's
Yeah.
hard. And that's one of the things that, for me, we had this conversation when we met, and
hmm
I'm like, this is the reason I work with 7-figure women business owners moving from founder to CEO is because that's about emotion.
Yep.
I need
It
you to
is.
maintain compassion, but I need
Exactly.
you to continue to lead with your heart, but you got to act with your head. When you're building a business that big and you got people, it's a business. Be
hmm
compassionate, but it is a
hmm
business, and businesses can't run off emotion. They have to
No.
run off
Well, and I
compassion,
think,
but
yes, exactly. Well, and I think you and I had also talked about this as well. Like,
yeah.
again, now having played both roles of playing the
Mm-hmm.
role of a consultant and also
Yes.
playing the role of a founder,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to wear the same hat because
Yes.
you have to, as a founder, you have to stay optimistic. Otherwise, you're not going to keep
Yes.
going. Like I was going to say,
Right.
that was my problem. Like you have to
Yes.
stay optimistic. You have to
Mm-hmm.
think you can always find a way through. You have to
Mm-hmm.
put your nose down and get busy and
Yeah.
filter out all the negativity that's coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to as a founder,
Right.
which is
Right.
why, again, not putting a plug for consultants, but why now I
Right.
am a huge believer in you need somebody unbiased beside you
Right.
that can wear that other hat. As I say, because I couldn't wear both hats at the same time. I couldn't wear
Right.
the optimistic, we can work through anything hat as
Mm-hmm.
well as the
Mm-hmm.
be completely realistic
Right.
by looking at the numbers and making all
Absolutely.
like it's too hard. It's too hard to wear, but
Yeah.
at least I had a hard time compartmentalizing both sides.
It's hard for both. I mean, it's the reason coaches need coaches, doctors need doctors,
Yep.
therapists need therapists, right? Because you can't always see the boulder in your own eye, right? You
No,
can't.
no.
And especially if you spend a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I know with me and Jenny can attest to this, right? There have
Mhm.
been many times. This is year 6 of my business. There have been
Mhm.
many times, and Leela too. There have been many times that I'm like, I'm just going to go get a job. This is
Yep.
insane. I cannot.
What
You
am I
know,
doing?
what
Exactly.
am I doing, and why? And no, this
And why
doesn't
am I
work. And
making this
no,
hard on myself?
and I am not going to be that sleazy person on LinkedIn that sends a thing that says
Oh,
connect with
hands
me and
down.
then buy my thing, or
Exactly.
just says, hey Laurel, okay, I noticed you're in a nonprofit. Let me do that. Really? Did you read the profile at all? I'm like, I'm not going to be that person. And so then trying to find the way to do the things that strategically you need to do to get your
Yeah.
business going, but that also align with who you are
Yep.
and all the noise that comes in about the
So
shouldas and the
much
couldas and
noise.
the must and the
So much noise. Yep.
it's
Yep.
a lot, right? And
Yep.
so if you think about kind of that business piece, you had to look at the numbers and have that conversation with yourself about, do I even want to do this?
Yeah. Yep.
Then you got the people side.
Yes. Which, like I said, that
Ah,
was all I could ever picture since, I mean, since my number one strength is relator, like I was
mm-hmm,
very
mm-hmm,
close to all of the people on my team. And all
yep,
I could ever picture was their kids not having food. It was like that
right,
was my responsibility, but that's what I was taking on. Like that's all
yes,
I could see when I was looking at this. And now everyone else is doing fabulously. They have
yeah,
new jobs that they adore. Their families are great.
yeah,
I'm the one still cleaning up the mess. And so that's why I'm like,
right,
wait, okay. Never mind.
right.
Maybe I should have watched out for myself a little more. It's hard. It's hard
It's
to not
hard.
be
It's hard. Yeah,
too compassionate, which
right,
again, I feel like it's not something I ever want to give up. I don't want to give up the
right,
compassion side,
right.
but also I do need to learn how to protect myself, which I feel like especially women entrepreneurs have
Yes.
a harder time. Yeah. So this is
Absolutely.
great.
And even for those people who are in corporate and maybe doing a side hustle, right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing about leaving a corporate job.
Yep.
There were over my career, the many roles that I had, there were several that I'm like, I stayed too long because I was worried about the team. People
Yep.
that I had hired, right? People that I brought
Yep.
on or brought over from somewhere else to my team because they were being mistreated or they weren't seen as talented, but I had them on my team. I'm like, no, this is
Thank
a
you,
good
Leila.
person with great skill and possibility. They just need to be directed, right? And so,
Yep.
but you end up staying as you said, and bringing yourself to a place that's not helpful or that
Yeah.
in some cases harmful to you
Harmful.
because you're more worried about other people than you are about yourself,
Yep.
right? That whole putting
Which
your mask on first.
this all comes back again. I'm switching topics a little bit,
Yep.
but this is all of the emotional side of the work I feel like you have to do as a founder,
Yes.
which is stuff they don't tell you about in business school.
Right.
and, so,
Right.
And this all comes back to, so I don't think I had mentioned, but like, so the whole reason I had started, thank you. Yes, it is not all unicorns and rainbows. In fact,
No, it's not. Right? Exactly.
It's just a horse with it taped on.
Exactly. That doesn't happen.
Exactly. But so the whole reason I had started Marie May on a whim was I was trying to fund doing business classes for underserved women. And so there was this sewing group in Rwanda that really wanted help, since again, I did a lot of my work was helping big corporations when they were going into sub-Saharan Africa. And so they were wanting help, like how do they actually find a local market? How do they stop being so dependent on US missionaries is basically what they were. And so anyways, so I'd started that to try that. So it was all rooted in this social impact piece of it.
Absolutely.
And so between the social impact piece and my lack of confidence in there, I would give things away for free all the time. I would never always have a hard time. I'm like, oh, $1, that's great. Like until we were having one time during COVID, I ended up taking an order. We actually got an Ellen subscription box. And so I took that. I took that order because there was trafficking survivors that I had been working with in Dallas for business classes on helping them like get back into office jobs instead of anyways. And so I was working with that. And so, but they all had been let go during COVID, and they were also, 2 of them were also immigrants that they were too scared to get on any sort of government subsidies. Anyways, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go after this deal with Ellen, get it so we can have a job for them to come in and fulfill.
Yes. Uh-oh. I think we lost your... Oh, there you are. Okay. Nope, you're back. You're back. Go ahead.
I was like, it ended up being biting off way more than I could chew in that one, doing that all in-house, because it was 75,000 stationary sets. Wow. Anyways, it was crazy. But while we were sitting there and doing all this work, like one of the women that I was working with, we had become close through all of this and stuff. And she like jokingly said to me, she's like, Jillian, what good does it do me if you were broke? Like, you are so
That's
correct.
A good point. That's a good point.
Like, that is a very good point. And you're right. I need to stop thinking about it, that I'm asking for me. I'm not asking for me.
No.
And so I think that was finally when that light switched. Like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like, no, as the leader, you need to be around there and stand firm on this thing, because otherwise, it doesn't work. So anyways.
Exactly. Well, and that's the conversation I have with founders all the time is, people think I'm really weird because as an HR person, I feel so fortunate because the person that hired me into my very first HR job was like, look, have you ever thought about HR? And I'm like, well, actually, yes, because I'm doing this risk management thing and y'all just don't get it. And so I was looking for something else anyway. Yeah. He said, well, good, because I'm looking for business people who are good business people, because I can teach you the HR stuff, but I need good business people, good thinkers. And so because I learned from him, and he was so aligned with the way I think anyway, I tell people all the time, look, it's mission first, people always. Because if the business isn't healthy, if you don't have a business, nobody has a job. So if you change it upside down, right, you're creating that self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it's not about being mean to say we're focused on the business first. It is about, we are absolutely focused lockstep on the business first, and people always.
Yep.
Because we can't run the business without people.
No, exactly.
Right? But if we don't run the business well,
we don't have any money to hire anyone. Exactly.
Right. Yep. So you have to have a healthy business. And so when you got ready to start, you've gone through, the numbers are saying, this the IRS comes in, right? Yep. It's just not the social impact that you're wanting to make, all the things. It's just not where you wanted it to be. How did you get yourself, because it is mindset, right? It really is
It is.
being strong in kind of who you are and getting yourself ready to do these things. How did you prepare yourself to have the conversations with your people?
Oh, it was awful. And as someone who cannot stand those kinds of conversations to begin with, it was like, oh, it was awful. So it really was a lot of just making sure there were no other options.
Yeah.
And so I fought against that for a long time, making sure, okay, can we work our way out of here? They had all knew we were struggling. Like I was very upfront about all of that. And so, all of that was there, but yeah, still mentally, I had to rip the Band-Aid off and do it. And now looking back, like it's still traumatic thinking about it. I was like,
of course.
Exactly. I was to say, it's hard. And like you said, like the piece of it of, yes, talking to the team, talking to investors, that also again was something I was terrified to do because it was a friends and family round. And so these are people I'm very close to. And I just felt like we were a total failure and that I could not figure out the puzzle to make it work. But like I said, now having a little bit of time past it, I did know how the puzzle could work. I just didn't want that puzzle. So, it would have just taken a whole lot more cash injection, and that was not.
Yeah, and it just wasn't.
That goes with that. Yeah. So
and
hard.
how it is hard. Yeah, it is hard, and I think you said it earlier too. Is as you were telling us kind of your story and what you did, and now you've kind of dissolved this piece of the business. And you said specifically, I don't see this as a failure, right? I see this as a choice. Talk a little bit more about that, because again, that's also a mindset thing, right? It didn't work out the way we wanted to, but is it really a failure or is it learned, right? And getting other people's perspectives off of us, not owning that.
Exactly.
So how are you picturing that?
So, like I said, like I feel like if I had kept going and built this thing that I didn't want, or it was like, I think it could have worked. That's what I'm saying. So I think of a failure as, okay, this business doesn't ever work. No, it does work. If you do this, this, and this, and we had finally gotten, but I finally figured out that's the only way this business works. And so then it was thankfully then it gave me the decision of, do I do that or do we shut it down? But a lot of the mindset then came into it on looking like a failure, because that's what everyone then is going to say is your business failed. And you're like, well, I wouldn't say that it failed. Like people had jobs for 8 years. We did amazing things. We were in all of the, like, again, the revenue was fine. And so, as I say, again, at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't think it actually failed. I think for me, it would have been a failure if I kept going, because now finally actually being back in my zone of genius, back in, like, it's just so much easier. Why did it take me 8 years of beating my head against the wall to say, I'm doing this the hard way? Like, stop doing this the hard way.
That is real. And Leela, thank you for the I was just looking at your comments. She's like, you can't serve from an empty cup, right? You just can't.
And
thank you so much Thank you so much for saying that, Jillian, because I've been telling people a lot. I'm like, this is year number 6. I finally am really narrowed down on my focus and my niche, because, and what's weird about that is, just like you, what I'm doing now is what I said when I started 6 years ago. But I let all this other stuff wind me up to get me somewhere else. And, well, let me try this, and maybe I should, because everybody else is, so maybe I need to, right? And it was too hard. And I don't mean too hard in that I absolutely couldn't do it. It took way too much energy to do that other stuff. And I wasn't excited about it. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't nothing. It didn't feed me. And let's not get this wrong, y'all. Let's be really clear.
It literally wasn't feeding me.
It literally wasn't, right? Yeah, I literally was like, look.
Feeding everyone else and it's not actually feeding me.
Mama's got bills to pay, right?
Exactly.
And I think what people need to really understand is, look, you have to be joyful in
Yeah.
what you are doing. You have to
Yeah.
enjoy what you are doing. You're putting your blood, sweat, and tears in
Otherwise,
here.
go be miserable back at a good paying job at in the
Go
where
get
we
a
were at
paycheck.
before.
Exactly. You have
I was
just
just like,
you haven't created a business. You created a
no,
job,
exactly, and one that I
right?
didn't like as much as I liked my other job.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's, I think people don't recognize that, just recognizing that you are shifting back to what is real and what is
Yeah.
right for you, and how many people would give their left arm to be in some of those boxes,
Oh,
right?
hands down, exactly. I know. I
Right?
know. Yep.
And the genius now you have, and the experience, the expertise you have now in
Yeah.
that process, that people will pay good money
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
because you actually
Exactly.
did it, right? So it's about shifting the mindset from failure to learning,
Yep.
right? So
Exactly.
y'all, as we wind down a little bit, I want Jenny and Leela, if y'all have any questions, feel free to, invite
I
yourself up
know.
to the
I feel like there
stage.
was one comment that she made I didn't see. Hold on. How do we keep jobs in the U.S., pay fair wages, and be profitable? Yes, it's hard.
Oh, I think I missed that
So
one.
hard
Yeah.
when companies ship jobs to low-wage countries. It's so true.
Yeah.
So I also have a lot of friends
Yes.
in the social impact business space, and so they
Mm-hmm.
again are in lower wage countries but paying fair wages, and it's
Right.
also it's hard. Um, Again, I think this is where it comes back into the education of the consumer. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
only, and from what we kept finding was finally realizing if they are a typical like bargain shopper to know
Mm-hmm.
that that's not my customer
Yeah.
because they didn't particularly care. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
then going after, which again, if that's what they fine. I was like, I just got tired of fighting it. And then so then, okay, well, then I'd play up the craftsmanship. Then I would sit there and play up the all of the reasons why these like real people are making your
Yes.
things.
Yes.
Like, so
Yeah.
that's what I was like. I feel like it's just educating and again elevating the quality because again I feel like
Yes.
people are willing to pay for it if the quality is there. That was
Yes.
what a lot of what I was working with that sewing group as well. We're like, okay, you can charge the higher prices, but you got to have the good quality to go with it.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, as I say, I
Yeah.
don't know if
Yeah.
that answers, but yes, there are several companies trying to figure that out at the moment
Yeah.
because
I love it. I love
it's
it.
hard.
Leela.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey. Yes.
Hi.
Great. Jillian, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I saw
Oh, thank you.
Laurel's post on LinkedIn about really encouraging people to share their failures, the things that we don't want to because we always share our highlight reel, right?
Yes.
Well, and that was why I was so like it's so important to me to talk about it
Yes.
now because I feel
Yes.
like people will talk about it, but they wait and talk about it once they're like millionaires and it's just a cute anecdote for why they're
Yeah.
relatable. And
Yeah,
you're like,
Yeah.
it's
no,
like
no,
politicians get a conscience when they're
yeah,
ending their terms. So yeah, I mean, but this is real. I mean, it is so important that you are speaking up and speaking out so people don't feel that when they're failing that they're in the minority
you're
or that
only
it's
one of
somehow
them. Yeah,
unusual because we know that this is such a tough road. And
Yeah.
especially trying to do it ethically. Yeah, it is
yeah,
hard. It's
and you
hard.
also mentioned some of the additional challenges for women. Can you talk a little bit more about that, particularly for women entrepreneurs and women leaders in this space?
I know on me
Yeah.
it was all the on me it was all the mental stuff, and so
Yeah.
and how much again, I am an oldest daughter. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I can be bossy. Like this is not I didn't have a problem bossing my sisters around, but this
Mm-hmm.
once I launched off onto my own in consulting, I immediately was hit with the imposter syndrome and I was like everything around my self-confidence. And so then I was like, well, I can't be selling me. That sounds
Mm.
braggy. Like it's all the stuff
Right.
that you're taught of being
Egotistical.
exactly. I was to say of being like the good little girl. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, it just felt I couldn't do it. And I felt like I was being a pest, which again is ridiculous. People need to
Yeah.
follow up about
Mm-hmm.
20,000 times to get what they
Right.
want. As
Right.
I say, so it's all the things now. I feel like but again, I don't know if I had to learn it by going through it. As I
Mm-hmm.
say, or maybe I'm just a hard-headed learner that I don't know. Anyway, I think it's the mental side that I feel like a lot of times women deal with a little a little more than the guys do as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Anyways, do you guys agree?
And all those old narratives, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, don't brag, but you got to say what you're doing so people know what you're doing,
Well,
right?
and most of it was all in my head. Like, that's what I
Yeah.
kept coming back to. I was like, it's not like I ever faced like overt people
Right.
trying to keep me in this box. It was all me and this is the same thing I saw with the deer trafficking survivors that I worked with. It was all them self-selecting out because they didn't think they and I'm like, no, you were a lawyer in Nigeria. You were not working at Taco Bell. Stop it.
Right.
I was like, no, stop doing that to yourself.
Yeah. So, but again, you can see that in those women.
Yep.
And it took you a while to see it in you. Yep. That's why we need our diligence.
I have a very hard time wearing both hats. And I don't know if that's a woman thing or if that's a me thing or what that is. But I have a very hard time wearing both hats because again, it's not hard to see in other people's stuff. Right. And I could see it in my stuff. It's not that I was naive to this stuff. I was just also optimistic I could outwork it. And no, I couldn't.
Jesus says you can't outwork the work, right?
No, you can't.
There's always going to be more there. There's always going to be more there.
Jenny,
did you have a comment or a statement or a question? If not, that's cool. But
thanks so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it and your vulnerability and talking about all the nitty gritty stuff. And so one of the questions I was wondering is, now that you know all of these things about the total life cycle of a business, including the ending part, which we never think about when we start a business.
Which, by the way, is way harder than I am. I actually am. So, and again, I'm like, are you stupid? Why do you keep why can't you just go back to a 9 to 5?
Right.
There's something about being able to chart your own course, as scary as it is, that I feel like once you have a taste of it, like it's too hard to go back. I just can't. And so I am doing it again. I just now, I'm actually writing a book about this on like all the things I'm doing differently this time. On things that I had learned and things that, again, this time I'm doing everything differently. So as I say, again, sticking to my strengths, doing things like being meticulous about the numbers on this kind of stuff. Not being scared to ask for the money, like as I say, which is novel, as I say, for me. So
me too. It's hard. It's hard to ask for the money.
Yeah. Especially in consulting, because you feel like you're asking for it for yourself. Like, but anyways, it's the psychology of it.
And that idea, I was talking to my marketing person the other day, and we were talking about some pricing for some services and stuff. And we did finally come up with what it's going to be. And it feels right. One, it's because the numbers themselves are numbers that feel good to me. But I remember as I was talking to her about it, I'm like, well, but then she's like, Laurel, the thing that we get caught up in, especially if you've come out of corporate, and even more so if you come out of any kind of consulting, is even though you may price on a project basis, you think on an hourly basis.
Yep.
And people who are buying from you when you think consulting will also think hourly basis because they're thinking lawyers, they're thinking, accountants, they're thinking. And she said, what you've got to remember and center the conversation around is you're not selling an hourly rate. You're selling expertise, right? You're selling all of the other work you do in preparation.
That's 20 years of what we've done.
All of that, right? You're selling all of that. You're not selling an hourly rate. And I was like, man, that's so good because there's so much more work we put into it and have put into it before that we're bringing to the table. Because those stories, to me, it seems like it's the personal stories, our personal mindset, but it's also our mindset around money. Asking for money, making money, managing money, all the things that we've heard, those old narratives that are gender-based around capabilities and understanding and all that we don't realize how deep right?
I know. Well, and I can't remember if I had said this on the panel, but I had, because again, like I felt like I could ask for money up to a certain point, but anything beyond that was free. Now, what that number is, I don't know. But like, we're only allowed to have enough to make ends meet, but like that's it. But to be wanting to strive for more was greedy. And so I finally asked, like, my lawyer friend, it's a guy, and he just exited a company and ended up making millions on it. And he is very much so, I feel like me in a lot of ways. So I thought maybe this might actually be something he would relate to. And so I asked him, I was like, do you ever feel guilty he's like, being rich? No. I was like, okay, well,
there you go.
Maybe that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
so it's like, yeah. So between that and hearing Cassie, I'll know, like, how are you, like, what good does it do me if you're broke?
Yeah.
Like, you're right. Why? I would spend this well.
Right.
What am I doing?
And that's what I love about, because I'm in Rachel Rogers' world, and what I love about her and how she talks about money and how she talks about building big, profitable, large figure businesses, right? 7, 8, she's now at 8 figures, and she wants everybody in her world to be at least that big. But what I love about the way she talks about it, which is different than other people that I've been in the room with who are talk about 7-figure businesses, is one, she's very practical about, here's some things that you need to do that are real. They're not just the 2-minute things. But she also very much talks about it in terms of, when women make this kind of money, women make an impact on their families, on their communities, on the world. This is about impact making. This is about legacy building. This is not about 12 cars and 14 houses. Now, if that's what you ultimately want to do with some of that money, do that. But what else are you doing?
Exactly.
Right? To leave this better than where you came. And so I think that mindset of money not being the root of all evil, but actually being a tool that is useful in making an impact is a total mind shift, right?
It is a complete mind shift. And why I had always, like, because I had people ask me several times at the beginning of Marie May, like, why don't you set this up as a nonprofit? And I was like, no, like, I want the market, like, I want to be forced into finding what works. And so that was, again, but that also comes back to, did I want to do fundraising?
Right.
No, because I have no woo, so I
right.
I was like, that was not my area of expertise. And so, but like, I wanted to be forced to find something that the market wanted, which we did finally find. They just, in order to make it work on the profit margin side, you have to scale it up.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Again, if only I could have learned that in 30 days instead of 8 years.
But look at all the other stuff you learned that you couldn't have learned in 30 days that needed 8 years. Right? So
it's true. And I've now had so many clients coming, like, back then to me, because they're like, it's because you sound like a founder. You don't sound like a consultant. And I was like, well, it's because I did.
Right.
Like, yes, exactly. Bezos, he makes me so mad.
Makes a difference. It really makes a difference when people know you've walked the road with them. Right. And that you're bringing something, not only are you bringing additional expertise that they don't have, but you're also bringing a true understanding and an ability to not only sympathize, but be empathic, right? Empathetic, with them because you felt it, seen it, been it.
I've had that pressure. Yeah, exactly. I know, the constantly waking up to think, okay, what are we going to do to make payroll?
You didn't read it in the book, you lived it. And that makes a difference.
No,
that makes a difference.
Trust me, I felt that heart.
Yeah, it makes a difference. So, well, Jillian, I tell you what, I have loved this conversation. You are just incredible. And I so appreciate you just out of that one conversation, just saying, hey, come on my show because people need to hear this story. And I'm so grateful that you are willing to be, as Leela said, open and honest and vulnerable. And Jenny as well, that said, just thank you for telling, the other side of the coin.
I think we need to talk about it.
I do too. I do too.
Like, otherwise, that was, again, in the business school classes that I had done. Like, I didn't want them to hit the first roadblock and think they were a failure because this wasn't happening. You're like, no, you just have to keep, keep finding your ways around those roadblocks until you finally, like, decide, does this work? Does it not?
Exactly.
It's hard. People need to talk about the nitty gritty.
They do. And
it's not.
And like you said, don't wait and talk about it when you've overcome it again. Talk about it through it. Because somebody else is in the middle of it too.
You're no longer relatable.
Exactly.
I was like, because that's what, like, I kept looking for podcast after podcast, trying to find somebody that was talking about it when they were shutting down their business on, like, what does this, like, what were they going through? I wanted to know how to do it well. Like, that was my other thing. Like, how do I make sure that we're being kind and we're doing all of the different things that we stood for to begin with? I wanted to shut it down well. but nobody talks about
Exactly.
it. Nobody talks about it.
Exactly. Nobody talks about that in that manner. Nobody does. Nobody does. And I think the power of this conversation, and I cannot wait for people to really listen to this and replay this, is the honesty, the vulnerability, and the word that I hate to use because I think we're overusing it, but it's true. And the resilience of that, right? You're still here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just saying, I'm starting another one.
It's like that one didn't work, but I learned this stuff. There was stuff that I really loved about it. There was stuff that I hated about it. There's stuff that worked. There's stuff that absolutely didn't work. So now I'm going to take all the stuff and I'm going to do it again. I don't have to just, go to ground. I'm going to take a minute.
And it's like the same thing that you said. It's like, okay, no, now I'm actually building what I originally set out to build, but
yes,
right.
Exactly. Exactly. Now that I'm back where I'm supposed to be, now let me focus on that.
Yeah.
So
like apparently I needed that learning experience
you and me too.
to get me back to work.
You and me too, my friend. You and me too.
Apparently I'm a slow
Me too, apparently. Who knew? Right?
I know. I would have never said I was
me
a slow
neither.
learner, but apparently
I'm like, I knew I had a dip in my learning curve. Like some people say their learning curve is like a ski. Mine's like a check mark, right?
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't know the check mark was 6 years long, but who knew, right? So now I'm expecting the exponential, right, upside of the check mark. So,
exactly.
We got to go through the dip so we can get to the other side. So
apparently,
thank you, thank you, Jillian. For those of you who were watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. I will be putting Jillian's information out there too. I think sometimes it transfers over, but sometimes it doesn't. So I'll make sure go follow her on LinkedIn. You can find her at Ryan Jillian on LinkedIn, and go look at her and follow her and see what she's doing. And we'll stay tuned for the book
I'm
as
about
well.
to be getting a lot more active. Yes. On there as
absolutely
well. So,
go connect with her and Leela and Jenny. Thank y'all so much for being on the show. I saw someone else who joined too, but I didn't see them coming on the stage. So thank you for there. Deshaun, I think is who it was. So I really appreciate it. I am Laurel Rutledge, your host of Alignment Vision Action here on Fireside. You can also catch my podcast that drops weekly, the Rutledge Perspective Podcast, and my radio show that's every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Time on KCOH TV Radio Global Network, the Boost here in Houston, Texas. I also live stream that. So you can catch me on LinkedIn at Laurel K. Rutledge. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, all the things. So if you're looking for me, Laurel K. Rutledge or the Rutledge Perspective, just about everywhere, and you can find me. So thank you all for tuning in. Jillian, we're going to do it again. We'll find a time.
Okay.
We'll find a time. Have a great day.